Let me ask you a question. If a country spends more than $2 billion every single day on its military, what do you think it isn't spending that money on? Because economists actually have a name for that. It's called opportunity cost. Let's start with the scale of it. The United States spends over $2 billion every single day on its military, or roughly $800 billion every year. Yeah, like almost $1 trillion. And to put that into global perspective, the United States spends more on its military than the next highest 10 countries combined. And before you smash that comment button, this is not about abolishing the military. Every country needs defense. But economists have been asking a different question for decades. Not, should a country defend itself? But rather, what does it choose not to invest in instead? Because every dollar spent in one place is a dollar not spent somewhere else. That's what opportunity cost means. And here's where this conversation gets interesting. Because poverty is expensive, poor health is expensive, an undereducated workforce is expensive. When people don't have access to health care, productivity drops. When education becomes inaccessible, innovation slows. And when poverty grows, societies end up paying for it later through policing, prisons, emergency health care, and social services. Those costs are real. They just don't show up in a single line on the budget the way military spending does. But here's the part that really made me stop and think. Since 2001, the United States has spent about $8 trillion on wars and related military operations. $8 trillion. That estimate comes from the Costs of War project at Brown University. And when you break that number down, it gets even more staggering. $8 trillion works out to be about $24,000 for every single American alive today. Now again, this isn't about saying a country shouldn't defend itself, but economists often ask a simple thought experiment. They ask, what if even a fraction of that money had been invested differently? Free public college across the United States would cost around $70 or $80 billion a year. So a month's worth of defense spending. Major poverty reduction programs would cost a few $100 billion. Large-scale investments in scientific research, medicine, and technology transforms entire industries. The point isn't that a country should eliminate defense spending. The point is that every budget is a statement of priorities. And those priorities shape the future. Because when countries invest heavily in education, healthcare, and research, those investments compound for decades. They produce healthier populations, more skilled workers, more innovation, more economic growth. And that raises a really interesting point. Because history shows something important. The countries that shape the future aren't always the ones with the biggest armies. They're often the ones that invested the most in their people. So the real question isn't whether a country should defend itself. The real question is this: what actually makes a nation strong? Because history suggests something interesting. No country stays on top forever. And that brings us to a phrase people love to use: exceptionalism. The idea that some countries are permanently ahead of everyone else. But history tells a very different story. In part 2, we're going to unpack just that. Peace out, and if you're not already following me, you should. It's going to be a ride.